Hi, my name is James Baumgart, and for our first current event presentation, I decided to go with something some of us probably all know too well, and that is the nationwide high rent prices. For this article, I found CNN's Anna Banney, who wrote an article covering the topic. And with that, let's get into economic current event number one on how half of U.S. tenants cannot afford to pay their rent. Uh, First thing, and most honestly, one of the more important things that kind of stuck out to me personally was that more than 50% of people are living beyond their means. And to be considered living beyond your means is to have your rent or your mortgage be 30%, more than 30% of your monthly, monthly take home. And obviously, people can still spend more than 30% and be fine and, like live there. But I just thought it was odd that more than half of the people around the country are in that position, and it's unfortunate. You also see that in the past year, rent has been going down, but it's still unaffordable. Since the pandemic, the median rent is still $309 above where it was before. And when you look at other places like the highly populated areas like Chicago, LA, or New York City, where there's a lot of people, like high influx of people living in apartments, places like that haven't even lowered their rent because people are almost forced to pay it. They don't have anywhere else to live. This graph here shows kind of shows when COVID hit. You see, kind of has a slow bump in there, and then it went down, that following year. But then you see from 21 to 22, you see a huge amount of growth going from around $1,650 to $2,400 price increase in the span of a year on average rent. Since then, it's continued to go down, but we're still much above that pre-COVID mark, so there's still work to be done. Continuing with this article, you see that the supply of apartments has gone up. In 2022, you saw that 436,000 units were built, which was the most ever since 1988. And along with that, you also see that the amount of apartments made per year on average has risen by 33%. And something that really stuck out, which I thought was just kind of a crazy number, was that as of July, over 1 million units were being built across the country. And that just seemed like a lot. Along with rent prices going up, you see that the interest rates have gone up as well. This is part of the problem why rent prices have gone up. It's because of these interest rates, and along with interest rates, that therefore affects, the cost to build and everything that goes into it before. Therefore, they have to charge you more rent in order to remain profitable. And kind of to wrap the whole article up, she ends up concluding it with a quote from Harvard University saying, "Affordability will remain a critical concern for many renters." But for me, it just or creates the question, what's it going to take to return us back to normal? After reading this, I was able to find a couple ways how this connects back to class. But obviously, the first thing that came to my mind was inflation. Our textbook defines inflation as a generalized rise in the overall level of prices. When rent prices increase, it has a whole bunch of different effects on inflation. Whether it's consumer price index, cost plus inflation, or, indirect effects on other sites. You see the CPI is directly affected, the cost of living increases. Therefore, the CPI increases which is a general tell of inflation. You also can see how it's related to cost push inflation, because if the rent of a small company goes up, their fixed costs rise, resulting in the price of their goods to rise. And this happens all across the board. Any company, anywhere where the fixed prices go up, therefore they have to charge more money. Along with that, you also see that there's an indirect price on other goods. When people begin spending less money on other things, therefore their time less is invested, and it creates a shift in price for everything, a shift in demand, shift in supply. Everything just gets kind of shifted around. The second way I found this relevant to class is with the aggregated demand curve. The book defines this as the relationship between the price level of the total quantity of output buyers collectively plan to purchase. Um, how this is relevant to class, it pretty much just means when rent prices increase, it affects the aggregated demand curve because of the decreased amount of disposable income, the shifts in spending patterns, and the wealth effect. Um, when it decreases your disposable income, it takes away from the money that you have to go out and do stuff. So therefore, when demand goes down, so does supply, and you just see an entire negative shift in the entire economy as a result of that. You also see that it changes the way people spend their money and how. Kind of an example here, it's like before COVID, when everything was really good, the economy seemed to be doing really well. A lot of people were shopping at Target and Hy-Vee, Fairway, all that stuff. But now after COVID, it seems like Walmart has really gone up, and all these is becoming more popular, and it's when people have less money, they tend to seek out these more total value retailers, and it just again affects the demand of everything because places like Target and Hy-Vee who have more expensive products may lose some of that business. And the last thing it does is affect wealth. When the price of rent goes up and the interest rates go up, and the overall cost and value of your homes goes up or your apartment building goes up, you want to charge more for it. If you're saying if other people are getting $800,000 for this building, whatever, and there's 4 units inside of it, it's going to be more than he's going to charge you. Well, yeah, like I mean, it makes people more conscientious about how they spend their money and makes them value it more. The final way how this relates to class is with the domestic supply curve. The book defines it as the quantity of goods the producer, the U.S., plans to sell at each price. That pretty much means, higher rent. As rent prices become higher, the domestic supply curve is affected in a whole bunch of different ways. The first one is being how the cost of production rises. Tying back to one of the previous slides, when the cost of rent goes up, businesses charge more for their goods and services. If rent costs $300 more a month and went up 5%, you can expect the amount of that product to be produced at, like they're not going to make as many of them because they're not going to, they're going to have to produce more and charge more for it in order to compensate for that loss. High rent prices also affect the domestic supply curve because of what it does to profit margins. Again, just like how they have to raise the price on that, sometimes companies can't do that because people won't spend more. Therefore it decreases their profit margins. And the other thing it does is affects exit and entry into the market, right? So if when you have new people trying to come in, if rent prices are super high, you're not going to see a lot of people opening up new stores, trying to start new businesses, just because it's going to be harder to make money due to the fact that like the rent is higher and your fixed costs are so much higher. Relevancy to me. There are probably a million ways how this is relevant to me and everybody in this class. I just picked 6 of them that I thought were good. The first one is being how high rent can cause financial strain. As someone who's starting to live on their own, rent is probably my biggest expense. And because rent is it's not like super expensive, but like expensive enough, I don't get to go out, golf as much as I want to, go out and hang out with my friends as much as I want to, because like I need to make sure I'm spending money on like important shit, like rent. It also affects, what you want to do with your job and your career choice, where, I would love to be a fishing guide and take people fishing all the time, but if it doesn't pay rent, then I have to find a new job that does. It also therefore delays financial goals. Kind of an example that was relevant to me. Before I moved out of my parents, I was paying off my car and I was on track to pay it off early. And as soon as I moved out, it just went right back to being normal and like right back on time, which it isn't like a problem, but it was inconvenience I wasn't really expecting to deal with. This is also relevant because it limits the places people can live. currently I work out in Waukee, which it would be really nice to live out in one of those apartments, kind of on Grand Prairie Parkway, close to my work. But because the apartments out there are more expensive, it forced me to look somewhere cheaper. So I have to live farther away. But it is it limits your options because of high, like you have to find somewhere cheap unless you want to live in a shoebox. Um, it also affects your quality of life. Um, Luckily for me, I don't have to like really struggle with much of this, but like talking to my friends and like hearing how they might like they're eating ramen every night or they're not turning on any of their lights or like they live in a worse area, like a terrible area of town just because like the rent is so expensive everywhere else, like their quality of life decreases. Like building off how their quality of life decreases, um, you look at the psychiatric effects that come with this. And, the psychiatric effects are huge. It makes people anxious about rent or, having to constantly worry about if you're going to make rent the next time or next day or, it's a struggle that a lot of people do face. And other people may even become depressed about the quality of life, and it's like they can't afford rent, can't afford to go out and do anything with their friends. They just don't like it. Overall, high rent prices have an extreme effect on me and people our age and just people who are starting to live on their own 100%. Here are my citations. And that's all. Thank you.